Good morning. I'm Sandra Astars. I'm a professor here at Scalia Law, and I'm also a senior scholar and director of copyright research and policy at the Center for the Protection of Intellectual Property. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our Evolving Music Ecosystems Conference. It's fitting that the first conference we are hosting in this strange academic year focuses on music, because people have always turned to music as a source of solace and of healing. We were all moved by the powerful scenes of people spontaneously singing from their balconies in Italy at the beginning of the coronavirus lockdown, and similar musical displays of solidarity and of compassion and of hope for healing have occurred throughout the ages. It also strikes me that it can't be just a coincidence that Apollo was both the god of medicine and of music. But the theme of our conference is broader than just music. It is evolving music ecosystems. And strong, healthy ecosystems are important to sustain all creative disciplines. And in turn, creators and their work nourish and support their communities. I'm delighted to see that we have such robust registration for the conference, and I'm certain that whether your interests are particular to music or not, you will find themes that interest you throughout the event. It's my pleasure this morning to introduce you to CPIP's Executive Director, Professor Sean O'Connor. This conference is Sean's brainchild. He began this dialogue between musicians, fans, academics, lawyers, policymakers, artist advocates, and anyone else who's interested in supporting flourishing music ecosystems in his previous role at the University of Washington School of Law in Seattle. We're thrilled not only that we were able to lure him to our law school and to run CPIP, but also that Sean continues to pursue his passion for music through this unique conference, which we are now honored to host. So with a little virtual round of applause for Sean, I'm going to turn it over to him to further introduce this event.
Thank you, Sandra. It really is just a pleasure that we are actually pulling off this conference at all. As you know, COVID, everything going on, has put off this conference a couple of times from some earlier dates, and we'd hoped to delay it enough to do it in person, but of course, other things intervened, and so we felt it was important to do the conference and still keep it online. I want to just, before turning to more of the details on the conference, well, I can't thank Sandra enough for being the director of our copyright policy and research at CPIP. She's been in that role for many years and really, in fact, brought just a robust copyright program to CPIP from its earlier days, and just continues to work with the network she has, which is just amazing, around the country and around the world, of copyright professionals, and keeping us at the forefront of copyright issues. Now, to the conference. As Sandra mentioned, it is indeed a follow-on to a conference that I put together in 2018. And that conference was an outgrowth of a book that I'm delighted to say the first few chapters are coming online now. It's published by Oxford University Press, and it's called the Oxford Handbook on Music Law and Policy. And in shaping that book with the editor from OUP, Tim Allen, who I think may be joining us and attending some of the sessions today, or through today and through Friday, we decided to cover the full music ecosystem. And what we meant by that was, rather than only focusing on copyright, which obviously is a core part of how we value music and enable people to get compensated in the music ecosystem, we wanted to look at everything that goes on. Many law academic conferences focus only on the copyright piece, and often that really on infringement issues. And while that's an exciting and ever-changing area, there is so much more to a music ecosystem. When we did the first conference in 2018, I think it was not quite as clear to everyone that looking at the full ecosystem was important. Although there were many organizations and offices in music cities, part of mayor's offices and other development offices that actually had looking at music cities. That was their job, looking at music ecosystems of music cities. And the idea was that really a music ecosystem is as important to nurture and to understand how to do the best policy for as it is to think about where the next Silicon Valley is going to be. So in other words, the way we've spent a lot of time as academics and policymakers looking at how you create a robust innovation district or innovation ecosystem, something that George Mason and Scalia Law School are involved in Arlington right now as well. But it's equally important to think about the analogy for that to music. And so thinking about how a music ecosystem, just like a tech hub, needs to have a lot of different players. So certainly the artists, the performers, the songwriters themselves are the heart of it all. That's where it starts. Key music, key songs. But then how do we put that into live performance? And as we start thinking about live performance, then I think we all know that this conference is probably even more important. This idea of looking at the music ecosystem is just critical now, as we've just had a calamity happening to our live music systems across the country and indeed across the world. So how are we going to get those venues back? Will we get all the venues back? How do we recreate that ecosystem that has just thrived in so many key cities around not just the US, but around the globe? And have put cities on the map that really, in some ways, music is one of the main industries that they have. So it's important to look at that live music performance. How does that happen? How do clubs sustain themselves? How do promoters and producers ensure that artists get to the right venues at the right times for the right audiences? That's a key part of the ecosystem as well. And then, of course, looking at recording and distributing music. So both in the, still some people do in the old sense of vinyl, make still a resurgence. CDs are still out there. Cassettes are kind of making an interesting resurgence as well. But then, of course, the digital platforms, streaming. And now in COVID and the pandemic, we're looking at how you do live streaming to try to recapture at least some of the magic of a live performance. So while we're not in person, that's created its own sub-industry now of how you do effective live streams. So again, thinking about the whole range of all of the players that come together to not just make a great music city, but create music ecosystems that span across nations and the globe. So it's critical to really look at all these issues. So we're hoping that this conference, again, following on from the one in 2018, will allow us to keep exploring beyond the important part of copyright, but looking at other issues, management issues, agent issues, all these kinds of things that are critical to how music happens successfully in all the ways that it does. So as we look across the conference, you will see that we really have quite a range of things. Of course, we're going to start with the panel starting after this. We'll be looking at the Music Modernization Act, just a really important piece of legislation that was passed and is still being fully implemented now. So we will look at the MMA, and then we'll look at the changing nature of sound recording rights. So we, as probably all of you know who are attending this, the difference between the composition right for music and then the sound recording right, that made sense to have them quite different in the early days of recorded music. But now with so much going on and so many compositions being done starting from the recording stage itself, so not somebody with pen and paper and then later thinking about recording, but many compositions really originate from the workstation, from the digital audio workstation itself. You're composing with those tools. So what does that mean for the nature of sound recording rights? And then tomorrow, we will then turn to then scope of a musical composition. That's really just continued to be a very hot topic with so much litigation going on. That's one of the classic kind of copyright areas that a conference like this would focus on. And then we couldn't be more thrilled that our keynote speaker tomorrow, Rosanne Cash, has stayed with us through all the twists and turns of rescheduling. And we just, again, couldn't be more honored that she will deliver the keynote tomorrow. Then we'll look at the new role of record labels and platforms. So labels themselves as producing and distributing music, and then platforms largely around streaming content. And so how are they changing in the new way that we record and distribute music and the way in which people consume music? Closely tied to that then is our session 5, which is data ownership and analytics. So nothing could be more important now for looking at the business of music as to the data, the massive amounts of data coming out of that streaming and usage of content, of musical content around the globe. Who controls, who has access to that data, how is it being used? And then we have session 6 will be management of artists and the business of music. How we make sure that artists are taken care of and can have their planning and things done and put together, very important. And then moving into session 7, supporting artists and communities. And this is where we really get into an often underappreciated and overlooked area of artist health, mental health, physical health. More and more organizations are coming up in music cities looking at how we give support to artists, because they don't have the insurance plan that a lot of people with quote unquote regular jobs have. They don't have the same support systems. And in normal days, they're on the road such a bit. It's really a taxing lifestyle. And so how do we make sure or try to help them have the resources they need? I want to then, before turning it over to our first panel, I want to thank our sponsors. This really wouldn't be possible without them. And even though we're online and virtual, there's still a lot of cost in time of our dedicated staff, who I'll turn to in a moment and thank them for all their effort on this. But there's still a lot going on that costs time and money to do these events. And so we just are just so honored that we have key sponsors for this conference, RIAA, coming in to sponsor this conference, and MSK coming in to sponsor in particular a networking event that will happen later today in honor of a friend to many of us, a dear friend who passed on, Jay Rosenthal. Just one of the consummate networkers, great guy overall. Just everyone felt like you were his friend. So just in honor of that, his firm that he had been at, MSK, is sponsoring that networking event. And then Copyright Alliance and all these organizations have been a great friend to CPIP over the years. And then you'll see, if you look down through the program, we have all of our other ongoing supporters and a number of supporters for this conference in particular, sending people and allowing us to do just really a high quality program. So I'll let you look through that on your own. Now I want to just take a moment both to point out to thank, and also so that you know who you can contact if issues come up. We just have a stellar staff at CPIP that made my job coming in as executive director about a year ago so much easier. Well, you know, Sandra Astars is a professor and also our director of copyright policy. We have Devlin Hartland, who's also a professor and runs our communications programs. We have Joshua Kresh, who has joined us recently as our deputy director. And we have Christina Pietro, who many of you interacted with, who is our director of operations, and really just make sure everything, trains run on time, because I'm terrible at that kind of thing. She's awesome at it. And then Mary Claire Durrell, who joined us about a year ago as well to assist and be our program assistant with Christina and with all of us. So that team has just been fantastic. I think you've had contact, many of you, especially the speakers and panelists, with Christina and Mary Claire, and they will be the ones that can help make sure everything continues running smoothly.